Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donahue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy. Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donahue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is Miss Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend, and Happy New Year. We're finally in 2022.
Happy New Year.
Yay, everybody. We made it.
It's happening. It's happening.
It's finally here. And this is a special occasion because this is season 14 and episode 1 of the new season.
14. Someone in the What a Creep group said we're the Grey's Anatomy of podcasts. We just keep going.
We just kill off people when they bore us. Or they ask for too much money. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. The topic we're talking about today, it's not a person, it is people, it's a mindset, it's a thing that happened in history. Kind of a bummer, but we're taking a very high view of it. So I'm not going to get too granular with the details, but I'm going to give you plenty of resources for all of you to look up stuff for yourself if you want to dive in more. But at first, I want to say that you can follow us on social media, and we do have a basic Facebook page, but we don't really use it that much. That's just a place for people to complain about our language. We use salty language on this program.
Fuck yeah.
We have a private Facebook group. You do have to answer a few questions before you could join the group. So please don't ask your friends to join the group because they're completely confused by all of this. But if you want to join, yes, you just type in What a Creep podcast group. We are on Twitter at CreepPod because somebody had What a Creep for 10 years and never used it.
Creep.
We are on Instagram at What a Creep Podcast. And Sonia and I are both on the TikTok. We'll give you our handles at the end of the show. And Sonia, do you want to tell them about the website?
Yes, you can go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you ever wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. It has links to all of our episodes that are available. It has a link to our Patreon page, and it has a link to our merch shop. So if you want T-shirts or tote bags, more face masks because the pandemic's not going anywhere, you can get them there. And I am going to start uploading some new designs for T-shirts. Well, I mean, and you can put those designs on anything you want, including "Damn it, Max," which one of our listeners requested.
I love that. In case you are curious, the first few seasons, 1, 2, 3, those 3 seasons are on our Patreon page. If you want to support the show, go to Patreon and look up What a Creep Podcast. We put out 2 bonus episodes a month. Plus, we have a newsletter that'll be going out. And we're, sorry, Sonia busted her elbows. You all know that story from December.
Yes.
It's a new year.
So the newsletter will be happening, and those cards for Patreon people will also be going out too. It was because of my busted bows, but they are healing and I can type. So everything is getting back to normal.
I want to thank our newest members, Lucy and Cynthia, for joining. And I'd like to thank the following people leaving us 5-star reviews on iTunes. It's Dakish, Jen Unstuck, Beck, Sarah Jeanette. And I actually want to say hi to Nurse Natasha, who's having a bad day and lshe left us a 2-star review. She sounded like she was having the cranks that day.
Oh,
but
we're not for everybody.
But we are here for you. So, Sonia, are you ready to rock?
Yeah.
Today, our creep is actually it's a time in history. It's very recent history, unfortunately, and it's about the Canadian residential schools. And Sonia, do you know anything about Canadian residential schools?
The tiniest bit.
Okay. We'll be talking about that. From 1831 to 1996, North America, including the States, put 7 generations of Indigenous people, primarily children, into residential schools to take the culture of First Nation and turn it into Christian European society. The Catholic Church was often involved, but the Canadian government ran quite a few of them. over 150,000 children were forcibly taken from their families and sent to overcrowded schools that cut their hair, changed their names, made them convert to Christianity, and exposed them to violence. They were forbidden from speaking in their native language. Many died and were not reported to authorities. It's an estimated, by the way, that about 25% died from everything from illness to malnutrition.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, it's a heavy one, you guys. Last year, more than 1,300 unmarked graves were found at 4 different residential schools, former schools. And this caused the nation of Canada to really, we're hoping to finally come to terms with a national stain that has never actually been rectified. Let me make this clear. We're not great about treating our Indigenous people here in America. We don't have a great history with it. Many countries around the world also don't have a great history. So we're not saying, boy, does Canada suck. I am talking as a person who actually is a Canada-phile. So this is kind of hard for me, but it's also, you have to listen to things and you have to learn things and you have to deal with things that are unpleasant in order to get through them and to get to the other side.
Yeah, this is something that a lot of countries are dealing with right now, where we're trying to address the things that we've done wrong in the past. And how do we, I don't know if you can't really make amends, but you can educate people. These are things that are not taught in schools.
And that's
I'm glad
an important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that people are finally talking about it. It's good.
Right. This episode has trigger warnings, child abuse, sexual assault, racism, and cultural genocide. So please take care of yourselves while listening. These are my sources. These are all going to be listed in the show notes and on the Facebook page. And Sonia's you're going to do a list of ways you can help.
Yes.
In our Facebook group.
Yes. I found a good list on Elle Canada that has it's a good list of organizations that you can donate to if you're looking for ways to help.
Okay. So my sources are the Wikipedia page, obviously, for Canadian residential schools. The Guardian newspaper has an excellent map of the schools of North America. It's pretty shocking. NPR, New York Times, Indigenous Foundations.org, The Economist, Scientific American, Al Jazeera, the Carlisle Indian School Project. I'm sorry for using that word. That is the name of it, and that's what you have to type to get to the organization. I'm going to also say there's some words that people used to say quite frequently, and we don't say them now. Language changes as we grow, and so I'm going to be as thoughtful as I possibly can. Please understand, I don't want to offend anybody. Books, The Sleeping Giant Awakens by David MacDonald, and Intimate Integration, The History of the 60s Scoop. Sonia, the 60s Scoop sounds like it would be like a really fun weed to get at the dispensary. But it's actually a huge fucking bummer. You're going to find out about that. That book was
good to know.
Yeah, that book was written by Allison D. Stevenson. So if anybody mentions the 60s Scoop, you guys just understand it. It's not going to be a fun story. Canada's Dark Secret documentary. These are all on YouTube. The links are in the show notes. Gord Downey's Secret Path, The Fifth Estate, which is the Canada's version of 60 Minutes, The Truth About St. Anne's, Home from School, which is a PBS documentary, Vox, and the CBC documentary Stolen Children. Whew, okay.
That's a lot.
Did a lot of research for this.
Yeah, you did.
And Sonia's such a good friend. She kept checking in on me like, are you okay? Because some days
it's
were
a
hard.
heavy one.
This is a heavy one. So just going back into the ideas of colonization around the world, if it's okay if I mention my other podcast, Sonia, it's Book versus Movie.
Of course.
We just talked about Apocalypse Now, which is based on the book Heart of Darkness. And it's all the talk is about colonization of Europe into other countries, and then deciding you need to be more European, meaning white, just basically genocide of people, their culture, their language, and the people themselves. This has been going on centuries, really. We're just now kind of coming to terms with it. And for Canada, much of it began for them as a nation in the late 1700s when French explorers came. They were fur traders, and they went across the nation and they would trade with different tribes. And they kind of thought to themselves, this would be so much easier if everybody spoke French. They talked, and it's a very Catholic nation. And so people thought, well, let's get some missionaries over here and start to convert people. Soon, more European and American missionaries started heading up to Canada because of all the vast resources that they had. But there are so many tribes, and many of them were like, yeah, nah, I'm not doing that. Let's just keep doing what we're doing here. And the Canadian government realized if they wanted to expand and become an independent economic nation, they needed to work on, and I'm going to say it this way, the Indigenous people problem. So they created something called the Department of Indian Affairs. And the decision was to take as many Indigenous children as possible and raise them in government and Catholic-run schools to make them more Caucasian. And the expression was, let me just be clear, sorry, just a sec. The expression was, kill the Indian in the child.
This is
I know.
fucking bananas to me. It's just, it absolutely boggles my mind that anybody at any time thought that this was an awesome idea. Like, let's just take kids from their families and put them in this thing and make them something else. It's
This is
okay.
Racism in action. And
yes.
And people were totally fine saying white is better, European is better. We need to change. They need to behave like us. And then if we're all the same, then they'll treat us better. And it's really fucked up.
Yes.
The Gradual Civilization Act of 1857 and the Gradual Enfranchisement Act of 1869 outlined these Canadian policies to take over Indigenous communities and drop their faiths and language to become Christian. In 1879, Canadian Prime Minister John Macdonald commissioned Nicholas Davin, whatever, to write a report on how great these residential schools were going to be for Canada. It was known as the Davin Report. Basically, they're looking for money to build these schools, and they're trying to justify it. So Davin concludes that parents and elders, they're kind of a lost cause. They're not going to change.
Yeah, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right.
Fuck those people. Let's start with the kids.
Start them while they're young. So the best thing to do is to round up the children, force them away from their homes, and assimilate them with a Eurocentric idea of being a Canadian citizen. Now, they also had them in the U.S., so they were kind of watching each other, how they were creating these schools. The U.S. focused more, because it was expensive, the U.S. focused more on just creating reservations to place entire groups of people, which is really fucked up. But there were some schools in the U.S. that followed this formula of taking kids from their homes and having them into these boarding schools. Now, in 1895, for example, 19 members of the Hopi tribe were arrested for not allowing the government to take their children to these schools. This was in Northern California, and they were sent to Alcatraz as their punishment.
Can you imagine that would be illegal? Like, you're not letting us kidnap your kids from you.
Right.
So off to jail you go. I know that this is where I should be jumping in with jokes, and I have nothing funny to say about this shit. It's fucking bananas to me.
Let me say now, we always end the show with somebody who's not a creep, and we've got two non-creeps, and they're funny and wonderful. So just hang on for that.
Yes, please.
The dates are very strange, like when things began in America, when it began in Canada. I would just say mostly between 1867 and 1939, the Canadian government ran the schools. Later on, they would focus more on having Indigenous children adopted into white families in North America. More on that in a little bit. But between 1945 and 1955, there were several day schools that were being opened as an alternative to boarding schools, because boarding schools are really expensive. You have to heat them. You have to bring food for these kids. We'll talk about the conditions in a second. Not only were they fucking shitty, but they didn't spend, it was expensive. Like, where did they put this money? What did they put this money into? Ugh. After that, there was the idea that since this is the 1960s into the 1970s, they've had these residential schools now for several generations, like 3 or 4 generations, and they still have an issue. These kids they're leaving these schools, And they're going out into the world and they're not succeeding as well as they were supposed to. It's not working. And there's this idea of, do we keep putting money into that, or do we just let the Catholic Church take over? And the Catholic Church was taking over. And the Catholic Church, pretty goddamn wealthy. They've got some fucking money.
Oh my God. The Catholic Church has so much money. And
they still take those donations every week. You pass the little hat around and everybody's got to put money in the basket. But they're not putting that into this. These kids, and I'll talk about their conditions in a second, but the 60s scoop is what it was called, was in addition to taking kids out of their homes for residential schools, and they would pick kids that they would go up to families, and it would be police and it would be social workers, and they'd say, your family, there's too many of you living in this, there's 10 of you and there's 2 rooms here and you don't have decent plumbing or whatever. They would just say all these reasons.
Yes.
So we're just going to take your kids away. You had no rights.
Like a child protective services kind of situation.
But the CPA, they have to have all these things in motion. They have to have a court order. They have to have people that have multiple degrees in how to handle the psychology of everything that you're dealing with. There's paperwork. There's follow-up. There should be anyway. This is, who cares about these people? Just take those kids out. Some of them, they immediately changed their names. Some of them, they just gave them new birth certificates, if they had any at all. It's unbelievable. And so what they started doing, Sonia, is they called it, they started a program for, hey, all you people out there that want to adopt kids, if you adopt one of these kids, we'll give you a stipend. And this is going to be easier than getting white kids. So why don't you instead adopt a couple of these kids? And you can have like a couple of sisters together. You can have a baby right away. It's just going to be an indigenous person.
Mm-hmm. And we'll pay you for it.
We'll pay you for it. And this was advertised in newspapers and TV commercials and on the radio. And there would be a picture and they would say, Gary. And he'd be like 2 years old. He likes to hug people and puzzles. He would work well. Like you would adopt a cat. Right?
This is so upsetting.
I'm sorry. I can't see you right now.
No, it's fine. It's not fine, but like, it's just so upsetting. I'm just so heartbroken for these kids and I'm so heartbroken for their families. Like, what are the chances that these parents would then see their own child on these ads?
And after they were taken away, and they're like, hey, if let's say you have a drinking issue, let's say that's your issue, and they take your kids away, I'm going to be sober, I'm going to really work at that, and I'm going to get it together, and then you see your kid on an ad.
It's awful, and there was nothing that these parents could do to get their kids back. What are they going to do? Not be,
they can
native?
Get arrested.
Yeah, it's awful. It's so awful. And these kids must have been so confused. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking.
The CBC, their podcast called Missing and Murdered had a season in 2018 called Finding Cleo. And there was a young girl who was taken from her home, and she was in a family with 6 or 7 siblings, and they were all taken away, and they were all put in different homes. Her poor mother never got to see her. They changed her name. She had no idea where she was from. And these kids, they run away. There's a lot of running away. And we talked about that in our last episode when we talked about Gord Downey, who's not a creep. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But as many as 20,000 children were adopted between 1960 and 1990 in this way. The peak for the residential schools was in the 1930s, but they slowly lost favor because they were deemed too expensive to run. In our last episode, we talked about Gord Downey from the Tragically Hip as our non-creep. And before he died, he was working on a graphic novel, animated movie, and soundtrack about Chani Wenjack, who was 12 when he was taken from his home and put into school, and he ran away. And when he ran away to go back home, he basically starved to death. It was so sad. So yeah, he was like found by the side of the tracks, and he had a little glass jar with some matchsticks in it. That's all he had.
Oh my gosh.
The story, it happened in the early 60s. It was put in a national magazine called Maclean's, which is like their Time magazine. in the late 60s. And so people kind of talked about people did talk about this stuff, but no one really got in there and said, this is fucked up. We're Canada. We're better than this.
And the idea that the schools fell out of favor because they were expensive. They didn't fall out because it's totally fucking wrong. It's kind of expensive to kidnap a lot of kids and force them to be white.
Yes. His project was called Secret Path or The Secret Path. I see it both ways listed, but I have the link. It's on YouTube, but I put the link in our show notes. You should check it out. He was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2015. In 2016, he performed with his band, The Tragically Hip, across the country as a farewell tour. I saw this on the CBC. They did a live, internet broadcast. What am I trying to say? But they did a, online broadcast.
Yeah.
The internet's the tube of whatever. So his final show was on August 15th in Toronto. And Prime Minister, Mr. I wish it was Mr. This guy, this fucking asshole. Justin Trudeau was in attendance doing what my friend calls the double denim nightmare, where he wears a denim jacket with denim jeans and they're like the same denim.
I've heard that referred to as the Canadian tuxedo.
Indeed. So he's there. He goes backstage. It's a big deal. And Gord hugs him and then says, please look out for Indigenous people. This is on your watch now. You're the Prime Minister. Help them seek the justice that they deserve. So Gord dies October 17th, 2017. Justin says he will, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to 2007. There was a considerable settlement given to victims of residential schools, and it was the largest class action settlement. I've seen numbers around $1.5 billion. The Canadian government, immediately created what was called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the TRC, to facilitate this reconciliation. So for 6 years, they interviewed people. They spoke with thousands of witnesses and victims. They held events to raise public awareness, and they had 94 calls to action to help further the cause when they were done. So that was in 2015. Justin Trudeau is now the Prime Minister, and he said he accepted the findings, and he promised to be an ally to Indigenous people, gives this big speech. Now, I will not say people have never talked about these atrocities over the last 100 years. There have been many attempts to get the story out, but much like here in the United States, the education about the extermination of cultures by colonizers, white people, has not been the main focus, or it's just ignored altogether. My education was terrible about this stuff. Like, they did not focus on it at all in my upbringing. I don't know about you. We grew up in two different places.
Yeah, no. I never heard any of this stuff until recently.
Well, when the TRC was in their fact-finding part, one of the things they learned was hundreds, if not thousands, of graves are littered across Canada that are not marked. Max doesn't like that.
Damn it, Max.
Damn it, Max. And a vast majority are of children who were never sent home to their families. And different families have different ways, and different tribes and different nations have different ways of dealing with death. Just like we white people all have different ideas of what to do.
What? It's almost like they're people.
Almost.
What?
So in 2009, the TRC requested $1.5 million from the government to find missing children and their graves, unmarked graves. $1.5 million. They said no. That was the other prime minister.
Fuck these people.
So fuck these people. So let's move fast forward to 2021 and this past May. The remains of 215 children were found at the former residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. I hope I said Kamloops, British Columbia. Then on June 23rd, 751 unmarked graves were found at the Mary Evel Residential School in Saskatchewan. And then June 30th, 182 unmarked graves were uncovered near St. Eugene's Mission School in Cranbrook, British Columbia. That's a fucking lot.
So many.
It's so many.
So awful.
So I don't know if you know about Canada Day, but that's July 1st. And it's there. Like we have July 4th or there's Bastille Day or whatever. Or there's Australia Day. Like Canada Day, I've been in Canada on Canada Day. Everybody loses their goddamn mind. It's a party.
It happens just like our 4th of July.
Yeah.
It's a shit show where people set off fireworks and blow off their hands.
It's also like Claire, it's middle of summer. It's a day off.
Yes.
It is fun. I like barbecues. I like going to the beach.
Sure.
You know. And Canada Day, usually it's a huge celebration. Everyone parties on Canada Day. And last year, everything was canceled. It became a day of mourning and reflection. Because people were finally like, fuck, we have to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So the stories that have been coming out for decades, but they're finally reaching a mass audience. And this is when I went through all those documentaries. I mean, they've been coming out the last few years. But these are just some of the instances they found when we're talking about the abuses. There's the cultural genocide. These kids showed up if they cut their hair. And in many of these cultures, long hair is a symbol of pride and being a part of a group. They cut their hair, they burned all their clothes. They made them some military uniforms, or they had to put on uniforms. They were forced to become Catholic or Christian. They were forced to pray on their knees. They were, many times in these Catholic ones, they were raised by nuns and priests who kind of have a reputation for being fucking sexual abusers. Mm-hmm. The sexual abuse and physical abuse is just heartbreaking, frightening. The stories. It's the teachers against the kids. It's the kids doing it to younger kids because they don't know. They're just being raised in such a horrible environment. No one's looking out for them. Kids are running away and they become missing and nobody does anything about it. Many kids, 25% of the kids who went to these schools, you had a 25% chance of dying. If you were serving in World
awful.
War II,
these kids, they must have been, I'm sorry, yeah. I don't mean to get upset. It's just they must have been so scared. It just like punches me in the gut. They must have been absolutely terrified.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, 25% chance of dying going to these schools, that's the same as serving in World War II if you're a Canadian soldier.
Right.
That's the same rate. And this is from illness, it's fires, it's all kinds of things. This went on.
They must have been so terrified and so scared and just so confused. And it just hurts my heart.
I'm sorry, Sonia. We're almost done.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. I'm okay.
And the thing is that this went on for 7 generations. So this passes on from one. And we know this about abuse. Mm-hmm. It takes a couple of generations to get out of a cycle.
Yeah.
And so these kids go out and then they have their own families and these people that tell these stories of, being cold and withholding love from their other family members because they just didn't even know how to express it because they were so terrified. There's so many adopted people who have no idea where they come from, where their people are, and some of them were molested in their families. I mean, it's just horrifying. There's also, this will be our own separate episode, but there's also a large number of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada that have been their crimes are unsolved. And there's also a problem where they had this huge judgment that I told you about. And who gets the money? Who is in charge? Who decides who gets the money?
Right.
And you show up and you tell your story and somebody doesn't believe you, which has happened quite a few times.
Sure.
So where do you go with that? I mean, these people deserve some compensation to just get, just to have a roof over your head and feel a little secure after everything they've been through.
Yes.
So these are all these stories that we're finding out. All right, Sonia. So we just have a little bit more to go. All right.
Okay. I can do it.
You can do this. You can do this. We're going to power through. I want to give a shout out to Barbara in Canada who reached out to us. Hearing that we were going to do this episode. She gave some really great resources, which you and I totally appreciate.
Yes.
We didn't realize up in Canada the issues that conservative media has with Justin Trudeau. I thought it was just a basic, like, there's our team and their team. And
right.
People seem pretty adamant about giving him the asshole edit. In September of 2020, he asked the government to recognize a National Day of Truth and Recognition. This was 9 months before these unmarked graves were found. And he promoted the hashtag Orange Shirt Day on Twitter. And I looked up that tweet. There's all these people that just like, oh, nice virtue signaling. I know. It's just like it makes you want to punch somebody in the face.
Quiet trolls.
Yes.
The adults are talking.
Right. In June of 2021, the TRC finally convinced the government to have this official day. It's called Orange Shirt Day. It's called Orange Shirt Day, excuse me. And I know orange is your favorite color.
It is.
It's because of Phyllis Jack Webstad. She is a survivor of the schools. 2013, she told a group of people at a reunion the story about how her grandmother bought her an orange shirt to wear on her first day of school. Principal or whatever said, no, we don't wear orange here. Stripped it off of her, and they never gave it back to her. And she's always thought about that shirt. And September 30th is the day they picked because that's usually around the time when children, let's remember that, children were swept up and put in these schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of people, if you do a quick search on the media, you'll find that they'll say, Justin Trudeau did not attend the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. That was on Thursday, September 30th, 2021. But on Wednesday, September 29th, which would be the day before, he actually had an official ceremony. And I'm going to read this word for word. This is from CPAC, and I'll explain that in a second, what that is. The federal government holds an evening ceremony on Parliament Hill on the eve of Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The new federal statutory holiday on September 30th honors the Indigenous children who died while attending residential schools, survivors, families, and communities affected by the legacy of Canada's residential school system. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is among those taking part in the event in Ottawa. He is joined by Savannah McGregor, acting Grand Chief of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly. Elder Claudette Commanda, and residential school survivors Celine Thusky, Elder Lavina Brown, and Jimmy DeRusher. Bless you. The establishment of a statutory holiday was just one of the TRC's 94 calls to action for the government. No, they did not hit all those calls to action, but at least they got this one out. And it's important to know that it was really important for the people from the First Nations, the Indigenous people, to have him there. No prime minister has ever done this. And that's
amazing.
Which is amazing.
Yes.
So the actual day itself, he is on vacation in British Columbia with his family. I get it that sometimes people, optics are important. I would say this as a communications person. Optics are super important. But he was there the day before, which is when you want to get the news out about something.
Right. So that people can actually plan for the day of.
Right. And and there was called, some people, there's a hashtag CDN Media Fails. They called this the Tofino ambush. That's where he was, in Tofino, BC. And basically, it's just people just trying to say, oh, he's just, like you said, like I said before, virtue signaling, and he blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to say that. And because he's liberal, and people like to take sides and whatever. I will say this, also because of from Barbara in Canada, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who served before him for 10 years, a total fucking creep. And he and his cronies will be an episode in the future. So keep that in mind, everybody. I'd also like to add, on that day, September 30th, 2021, the Queen of England sent out this tweet. I join with all Canadians on this first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to reflect on the painful history that Indigenous peoples endured in residential schools in Canada and on the work that remains to heal and continue to build an inclusive society, which is pretty major. She could do more.
Yes, she could, but it's something. It's a start.
It's a start.
I guess. Yeah.
Also last year, our current Pope, Pope Francis, issued an apology on behalf of the Catholic Church for what it has done to Indigenous people around the world. Once again, they can do more.
For sure.
They can do a fuckload more, but okay.
Yeah. And if he wants to issue apologies, there's a lot more he could start with. Yes. Or he could continue on that train.
He's the crazy liberal Pope, by the way, if you listen to the media.
Yes.
I also want to give a shout out to CPAC, which is the Cable Public Affairs channel. It's the only privately owned, commercial-free, not-for-profit, bilingual licensed television service in Canada. Wow. Yes. And on Twitter, I forgot to mention in my earlier notes, please follow Lakota Man, LOKATAMAN, Lakota Man 1 on Twitter. He has incredible information. And that's our creep this week, the Canadian residential school system. That's a very big overview. Like I said, there's lots of clips. There's lots of things we put it in the show notes. You could check for yourself. But it was a huge news story. We're going to cheer you up now, but that's it, Sonia. That's my part of the show today.
Good job, Margot. I know how difficult this one was for you. You did a ton of research on it. It's seriously good job.
Thank you.
That's a tough one. But
this one gave me the feels. Let me tell you.
Yeah, me too. And I went in knowing that it was gonna make me cry, and it did. And that's okay.
It's okay.
Like,
you should cry.
Yeah, we're human beings who have empathy for people, and it's seriously fucked up. And we are going to share links on places that you can donate to help if you want to do that. And I have a couple of non-creeps who I think make us smile. So I'm switching to my notes over here. I am pretty sure that everyone listening knows who Eugene Levy is and Daniel Levy. Do you?
Of course I do. Huge Schitt's Creek fan.
Big Schitt's Creek fan. So I'm going to start with Daniel Levy because he's born in Toronto. His parents are Eugene and Deborah. We're going to talk about Eugene here in a minute. But did you know he started his career as a television host on MTV Canada?
No. I
did not know this. He was like their Carson Daly.
He's better.
Yeah, he's way better. He is gay. He's been out since he was 18. He hosted on MTV. I did not know this. He is the first person ever to win an Emmy for producing, writing, directing, and acting in a show all in the same year for the final season of Schitt's Creek. That's amazing. But the reason, and by the way, his character David on Schitt's Creek, so fucking funny.
It's the best.
By the way, I love Schitt's Creek. If you haven't seen Schitt's Creek, do it. The first season is fine, and then the second season,
it really takes off.
Best.
Yeah,
it's the best. It's like Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec. That first season, you're like, and then it just takes off from there. It's so good. So do yourself a favor if you haven't watched it. And his character in particular, he is playing a character named David. He is the first openly pansexual character ever on television. And I love how it was treated on the show. It was just, yeah, he's pansexual. So what? It's like not a big deal. There's no homophobia about it in the show. It's just treated so very matter of fact. It's a big deal, I think, and I love it. But the reason I picked him was in 2020, he signed up for a Native Studies course at the University of Alberta, and it's the only Native Studies class in North America. It's a free course, and it's all about like Canada's like Indigenous history, and it covers the truth about the fur trade, the residential schools, land claims, environmental impacts, the legal system, the political conflicts, and about activism in general, Indigenous activism. And then it talks about what contemporary Indigenous life is all about. He signed up for it. It was all online and it was free. And then he tweeted it out and like put it on its Instagram, like, hey, I'm taking this course. Like, you should all take it too. 64,000 people signed up.
Oh, good.
It's like the most, I know, is amazing that signed up. And then after that, like all these other people just started signing up. So like all these people went to educate themselves. It was a free course. And then he finished the course. He's like talking about it on all of his channels. And he then was like, we should raise money for this because it's free. So then he raised $25,000 and then he matched it so that they could like pay for the faculty for actually doing this free course. And the woman who created it is this woman named Tracy Bear, and she's an assistant professor of Native Studies at the school. And she said, due to Dan Levy, more people than ever are engaging in this difficult history, learning not only about Indigenous people's challenges, but our resiliency and strength. Oh. I just think that is so, so cool. He's such a good person.
Yes.
And then he probably learned it from his dad. His dad is Eugene Levy. He's so amazing. If you've seen Schitt's Creek, you might be like, he's the dad from American Pie, or you've seen him in the Christopher Guest movies, which he also was a co-writer. A lot of people don't know that, but because they give kind of Christopher Guest all the props, but he was a co-writer on that too. I wanted to mention that Eugene won a Grammy Award for Best Song Written for Visual Media for A Mighty Wind. I think a movie that a lot of people don't talk about as much as like Best in Show or Waiting for Guffman. He's won the Governor's General Performing Arts Award. That's like Canada's highest honor for performing arts. He's been appointed to the Order of Canada, and he, of course, has won Emmys, and he's awesome. I love him. He's been married to Deborah Devine since 1977. And they have 2 children, Daniel and Sarah, who is also on Schitt's Creek. She plays Twyla. And the reason I wanted to mention him was because I did not know this. He is an advocate for autism awareness and treatment in Canada. And in 2007, he signed on to be a spokesman for autism and is working with the Canadian government. He wants to help them get a national strategy to increase funding and resources for the autistic community. And a lot of people don't know this, but like in Canada, here in the US, probably all over, there's a lot of organizations that raise money for autism, and they take that money and they put it into research because there's this idea that we can like quote unquote cure autism.
Right.
And it's bullshit. Basically, it's bullshit. Like, we have this huge population of people that need services. And one of the main things that a lot of people get when services that they need for autistic people are applied behavior analysis, like things that help them live in the real world. And that shit's really expensive. It's not always covered by health insurance. And so when you're donating money to these different organizations, look to see where they apply that money. Because if they're doing it towards research, you're not really helping the people you think you are. Mm-hmm. And he is a big advocate for that. Like, we should be putting our money towards programs and resources for the people that need it, and not research into how to quote unquote cure autism. So I wanted to give him a shout out too. Like, just like Autism Speaks is a big one that everyone knows. Autism Speaks, but most of their money goes to research. It's like not helpful. So just look where you donate. Same with breast cancer, by the way. Like,
yeah, awareness. We're raising awareness. Like, yeah, we're aware of it. Like, let's get some.
Do you know how many people like love to text me or send me things during Breast Cancer Awareness Month or Autism Awareness Month, or I call it Autism Acceptance Month. A lot of people do that. And I'm like, plenty aware here.
Yeah.
Got it.
We should say, by the way, you're hiding the lead. Like, you're the mother of an autistic son and you're a survivor of breast cancer.
I am. So whenever people, yeah, I know my shit. So when people text me about, and like, hey, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I'm all, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm aware. Thanks. But just look where you donate your money. And I like that Eugene Levy uses his platform for something like that. Like, that's an awesome, awesome thing. I think we talked about Joe Mantegna at one point. He does something. Yeah, he does something similar. It's not awareness. We need to talk about acceptance, and we need to talk about resources for the people that are here. And it's not just kids, by the way. These children grow up to be adults.
Right.
And we don't have things in place to help them function. Like, we need get jobs and places to live and communities like that. There's things that we can do to help.
Right.
So just, yeah, I like that his thing is about like helping raise money for resources, not research, which it's not that research is all bad, by the way. I'm not shitting on research. I'm just saying, like, let's help. We need to help people that are already here. So that's what I wanted to do. And like I said, I have a link to an Elle Canada article with a links to all kinds of organizations where you could donate to help other Indigenous organizations.
We'll post that to our social media.
Yeah.
So it's Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So we'll make sure you guys get that. And if you have any suggestions for creeps or non-creeps, you can follow us on social media. We love it when you use the Annie Potts gift from Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
We got one. I've also wanted to say about Eugene Levy. He was in Splash, which is one of my favorite movies.
I love Splash.
I have a super messy desk, and his character in Splash is always like, there's a system on the desk. And I yell that at least once a week to myself, by the way, because I work from home, but I try to find something. I'm like, there's a system on this desk.
There's a system.
There's a system.
I also want to mention that next week we're going to do like a real asshole creep.
Yes.
So we're going to have some, I guess I'll say fun, but with quote, as much fun as you can have when you're talking about a creep. This guy's just a fucking prick, and we're just going to fuck him. We're just going to go off. It's going to be the best.
Be sure to send us your ideas for creeps. And once again, for non-creeps, follow us on all the social media things. Feel free to send us an email. Also, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. I forgot to mention, we have stickers if y'all like some stickers. I have a stack ready. I put mail it together, and then Omicron hit. Now I'm terrified to leave my apartment, but I'm going to get this out.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the mail out.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, I have it all set up, so you should be getting them in the next week or so. But please, if you'd like some stickers, send me an email. Once again, also suggestions or interact with us. The Facebook group is a fantastic spot. And Sonia, where can people find you, please?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. Where can people find you, Margot?
They can find me at Brooklyn Fitchick, for Twitter and Instagram. My site is brooklynfitchick.com. And my TikTok is at Margot Donahue. I'm just dipping my toe into trying that out.
You're doing a good job.
Thanks, Sonia. I'm just looking for compliments. We'll be back next week with a new creep. In the meantime, everybody, stay safe, wash your hands, embrace 2022. Treat it like Taylor Swift, like we're going to just be enjoying ourselves.
We're feeling 22.
There we go. And don't be a creep.
Creep.
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.